So we move to the Dhamma's foundation of mindfulness. And here we start to look at the characteristic of all phenomena, all Dhammas that are appearing in our experience. You've developed your mindfulness, you've developed your samadhi, your collectedness of mind. So as you start doing this, you are lost for less time in your thoughts, you are lost for less time in thinking about the world, and you are spending more and more time with your direct experience, moment by moment, of your reality, of your sensory experience, of your experience of body, of your experience of mind, of the feelings that accompany everything. And with this preparation, with this foundation, we start to look at the characteristic of experience. If you are mathematically inclined, it's a little bit like taking the derivative of experience. You just look at the change, you look at the rate of change of experience. And experience is always moving through us. In every moment there's a different sensate reality. There's a different reality of our body, there's a different reality of our mind, which is happening. And also a different reality of the perception of what's around us. So this is changing constantly. And when we start to pay more attention to the actual experience rather than what we think, oh, I think I'm in this room and I think I'm talking to the camera, but what is that actual experience of being in this room? If I change my position slightly, the experience of the room changes. So we're looking more at direct experience. And this phrase that is always mentioned in the Satipatthana refrain, noticing the arising, noticing the passing away, noticing the arising and the passing away of things is what we're going to look at closer this week. And that is the characteristic of Anicca. So in the Buddhist way of experiencing or way of training ourselves, we are training ourselves to perceive and deeply comprehend three characteristics of existence. You might hear this as the three marks of existence. It's a kind of central theme in Vipassana practice as well. So the three marks are Anicca, Anatta, and Dukkha. There's many different translations for each of these Pali words, and we will step through them. This week we will do Anicca, next week Anatta, and the last week Dukkha. Anicca is translated as impermanence most often, but we can also say it's instability, inconstancy, change, impermanence. So it is this characteristic that experience, when we look more closely, is not something solid, not something unchanging. It is always vibrating, it is always shifting, fluxing, flowing. Experience is much more a verb, it's an unfolding rather than a noun, something fixed, something solid. But the way our mind thinks about the world is more in fixed terms. Our mind is like a computer that needs a symbolic expression of the way reality works, a symbolic expression of me, of my partner, of my work, of this object, of that object. So the brain kind of makes these solid, stable ideas of things when the reality of it is not so stable, not so solid. For example, the idea of a tree. So a tree is something that is constantly changing. From the moment it's a seed, it starts sprouting, it starts becoming a sapling, it starts growing, maybe it becomes a young tree, then it becomes a big tree. But that is an ongoing process. There's no fixed time when it turns from a sapling to a tree. And even if we do have a fixed time based on our definitions, it's really just our own ideas. which create this fixedness, this grid-like way of perceiving reality. And all our concepts are basically just things that are describing and symbolically standing for reality. So what we're doing in the Vipassana practice, we're paying closer attention to what is the actual felt experience of our reality. And these characteristics, it is said that to deeply comprehend two of these characteristics is to be fully liberated. So to deeply understand anicca and anatta, or anicca and dukkha, is to be fully liberated, is to be fully free and achieve unconditional freedom and peace that is not dependent on conditions, outside conditions, inside conditions. And this is really related to, so when we talk about impermanence, it's very related to our expectations of how things should be, expectations of how I should be, of how I should be perceived, expectations of how others should be, expectations of how my reality should be, the temperature of the room should be, the state of my life should be. And we're constantly comparing our reality to these expectations, but we're usually just thinking about it. And what these expectations create, they create a kind of black and white frame with which, or black and white lens with which we're perceiving reality. And the problem with that is when there's pleasant states, we assume these pleasant states. Deep down, we don't understand that they are impermanent. We assume that they are somehow more permanent than they really are, when in reality they are more a flow. For example, I feel happy and I think very happy thoughts about myself, happy thoughts about what's around me, and assume that's the truth, and that's some sort of stable, permanent truth, whereas it's not a permanent truth, it's just what I'm thinking. Or, for example, I get praise. If I get praise, someone tells me, Raimar, you are such a good teacher. I really enjoy your teachings. Some of you are doing this week, and I feel pleasant sensations arise, pleasant feelings arise, pleasant thoughts arise. And if I take these pleasant thoughts to be permanent, if I put myself there and hold them too tightly, yes, this is me. Yes, I'm such a great teacher. Yes, this is the pleasant experience. Then as soon as that changes, someone says a negative comment, or I start having a bad day and start having some bad ideas about myself, that illusion is broken and suffering arises, dissatisfaction arises. It's the same, so the change, when pleasant things change, there's dissatisfaction. Likewise, however, also when there's unpleasant experience happening, we take that unpleasant experience to be permanent. So we feel that this pain right now, this pain in my body is permanent, and it means this and this about myself, or what I have to do, and I have to change many things. But this pain is not permanent. Or we have a bad day. Usually on bad days we feel, I have to change things, I have to do something differently. Whereas this feeling is something transient, it's something that's moving through, like the weather. And so we resist, we fight. So the belief of permanence, the understanding of permanence, is also cause of craving, is also cause of resistance, clinging and aversion that we learned about last week. The more permanent we take things to be, the more we try to crave them, try to hold them. Yes, praise. If I get praise, it means I'm very good, and I hold this praise because I believe it is permanent. Or when something is unpleasant and I think it's permanent, I would be so resistant, so much aversion, so much resistance towards this situation. is not to say that we don't do anything in our lives, that we just passively let our experience pass by us. We can be active participants in our lives, and it's important also to be active participant, to live with intention, to live in a wholesome way, good for yourself, good for others. But we can do this with a lot of clinging to permanent ideas, permanence, or with a lot of space, with a lot of release around an acceptance that things are impermanent, things are in flow, things are changing. So, as always, the invitation is to not cling too tightly to your experience. So, this hand, which can be grasping, can be resisting, can be struggling, or this hand, which can be more relaxed, more open, allowing experience to flow through.